And we are officially live. Okay, welcome everyone. So good to see you, and a pleasure you could join us for this Arcturian Equinox. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mads, and I'm Danish, and I love to channel. And today, I think my impression is that they will, as you know, we will have a Q&A, and my impression is that they will deliver a message, which I'm kind of looking forward to. It's so they have been transferring a lot of excitement to me in these hours, and hopefully everyone is hearing me well, and have your questions and your own excitement ready. So see you on the other side, guys, and have fun.
Thank you, man.
Greetings, Earthlings. As we know, it has been spoken to you before. We come with love, and we come to transfer our excitement and wisdom to you, the human collective, as you go through this process of awakening and self-discovery that you are undertaking right now, and that has the greatest potential to set all of you free into new realities. Our message today is entitled The Hardcore. And have your questions and your own excitement ready. So see you on the other side, guys, and have fun. Oh, sorry, I have an echo problem here, so I will just turn that off. Sorry, guys, I'm terribly sorry about phasing this out, but yes, we apologize for that interruption. It is quite crazy how these technical issues can keep tinkering with the channel's patience, but know that we enjoy also these kind of impediments on the way to the light. We were entitling the message, The Hardcore. What we mean by that is that where all of you are going and what all of you are approaching within your personal process right now is that hard core of leftover essence from those old systems and services, those old constraints, those old understandings and beliefs that you had to latch onto in order to make it to this point. And so many of you have been experiencing physical ailments in one side or another. And for many of you, these are connected to a shifting in your very material reality, that is to say, in your circumstances, in the work you do in the world, in where you feel called to live, in where you feel called to breathe, in the words you feel compelled to express. All those things you are letting free, but you can't let them free without addressing that black hole that also sits within you. And it is a black hole of unconsciousness. And you cannot treat this hardcore, this black hole, by being hardcore. You have to let the light and the tenderness shine in. You have to surrender to the circumstance that the light within you will guide you. Much is spoken about manifestation on your planet and in those spiritual communities. But know that in these confusing times, that discipline of dreaming yourself into your preferred reality becomes tenuous at best and impossible at worst. Therefore, you all need to trust that you are going into that place where your soul is guiding you, And that if you are still hanging on, if you are still present in this timeline and you are receiving this message, you are beginning to vibrate into that spectrum where you will feel comfortable. A question that has been bothering the vessel we are coming through for quite a few days is the question of whether or not you simply need to accept physical ailments as a part of the spiritual journey. He was reading spiritual poetry and he came upon this notion in Rumi that the sage and the mystic, they ruin their body for God's sake. And know that it may feel like that for many of you, continuously going through these trials and tribulations. Some of you have had physical surgeries even to make it this far. But it is all a part of that going on and that going into a new world where you will vibrate harmoniously. You have been out of sync with your world for quite some time, but in the next 4 years, these energies will change, and what is old is vibrating out, and what is new, you are vibrating into. And this means that you will, in 4 years' time, find yourself in a place where those ailments and those troubles that bother you, they will no longer seem so pertinent or oppressive. We don't mean to say that you will be living in a paradise in 2024. That is not the case. You will still feel the need to explore your problems. You will still feel the need to impede your progress, the need to stumble upon painful challenges in your life, to go on and to learn from them and to expand and grow. But you will begin to choose what challenges you feel are compelling, and those challenges, you know them already in your heart. It can be quite difficult to find your light because your light is always shining. And so it is that thing that you bring with you wherever you go. It is that thing that always keeps you seeing even in darkness. And so we encourage each and every one of you to turn your attention to that place where you have always felt an effortlessness, that place where you have always felt that you were recognized for expressing your truth. And should you find that your environment is disharmonic and is impeding that, then also realize that your environment, you are able to change, and you are changing it by changing your vibration. And with that blessing, I, Umblam of the Arcturian Council, as a representative of all Arcturian experience and all Arcturian energy of our unfolding undying love, we give you this blessing, and we thank you for mirroring our love back to us. We love you very much, humans, and we are looking forward to interacting with you and answering your questions this evening. So please, we will ask if someone, in honor of the spoken word, will come forward on the Zoom call and speak a question to us, and we will be happy to answer it.
Good morning, Umblam.
Good.
Thank you for being here for us. My question takes us back to our last week's reading regarding the creation of humankind.
Yes.
And right into the animals, of course.
Yes.
My question would be if today at this time throughout the Zoom call that we could ask a few more questions around that issue, if that would be all right today.
That would be perfectly all right. And know that we are happy to offer our insights into whatever you may bring forward to us. So we sense that what is most pertinent to answer about that issue, and we will allow you to ask as many questions for elaboration as you may wish, but it is that humankind is in many ways a blueprint. You could think of that image you have of the Messiah or the Bodhisattva or the avatar in Hinduism, that notion that the divine, out of benevolence for the world, takes the shape of a singular human being, and through that human being, they reveal the love of the divine for every one of you, and they point the way towards that light within yourself. That is to say that essentially these people or these persons, such as your Buddha or your Christ, being the most famous examples of this, they were essentially that blueprint of creation. That is to say, they were so much in harmony with the 11th dimensional vision of how human beings potentially will be. But in order to actually participate in the goings on in the world, they had to lower their vibration to a 7th dimensional perspective. And in that, they found that extreme embrace of everything that humanity was. And that was the love they showed humanity. It was that sublime understanding. But know that this understanding, it doesn't only come from above. It doesn't only come from the highest human expression that each and all of you actually hold within yourself, as well as those enlightened masters did. But it also comes from your furry animal friends. It also comes from those four-legged creatures who show you a type of radical acceptance that is unusual to humans. It is interesting how your animals, in many ways, in this discipline, you could say, are more spiritually advanced than humans. That is not to say that animals have been capable of mapping the heavens or the extra dimensions or splitting the atom. But then again, they don't build bombs either. That is to say, what your animal, and we are referring mostly to pets in this case, what they are constantly encouraging you to do is exactly that same message as you heard from the masters. And that is essentially to allow yourself to be yourself, because you will notice that your animal has attachment and love to you no matter what, but it actually prefers to you and responds better to you in those situations where you feel you are in that happy or good feeling vibe, which is also a signature of being in alignment with your higher self. So we will then ask you, Katie, does this answer your question, or can we elaborate on it further?
You can elaborate on it further, as you said, in the divinity, from the 11th dimension down to the 7th dimension, where we created all beings.
Yes.
In that, in the divinity, God gave guardianship of the animal world to one of the archangels. Could you speak about that, please?
Yes, this is beautiful. It is quite complex, but you could think of it as we have previously, I believe, explained those ideas that the patterns of many of your animals are actually energies that have been developed into a ascended stage of consciousness, such as, for instance, the primate energies are being developed in you. They have undergone that process other places in the universe or in this galaxy even. And that means that they don't necessarily need to compete with you or add anything. So you could think of the archangels as those keepers of energies, those entities that carry messages, and much as the messages within your electronic devices, that is to say the flowing electrons, it is much the same with the archangel. And the vibration we are getting from this archangel is something akin to Usilip, but we believe you actually wrote a different name for the channel at some point, but it is a vibration that we recognize as quite embracing, caretaking, upholding. And notice that it is in that way, there are codes behind everything. And you know that the Archangel Metatron, you could conceive of him as that principle that is the ultimate code writer in the universe. But beneath him, there are lower archangels that tend to different needs. And one of those needs is to regulate which animal energies need to be present in the human experiment at different stages. And so when you see some of these animals, wild animals facing out of your planet, it is of course very sad, as is the passing of anything that you have grown attached to with a sincere fondness. But it is, to our perspective, also a lesson. And it is quite common that any ascending species will have many of these lessons on their path. We keep returning to the story, telling the channel about that time we blew up a neighboring planet in order to prolong the life of our own planet. But then what happened was that we did not foresee that the extra influx of solar energy from Arcturus actually meant that our planet began shifting and changing much faster than we preferred, such as yours is doing right now. And then understand that we actually had this experience quite later in our journey. So you are in many ways having experiences of destruction quite early, because we are attempting to increase and then level out the vibration of mankind quicker than it has happened any place before, such as is in accordance with your solar energies in this solar system. Does this answer your question?
Yes, of course it did. And I guess that I would just add this regarding the animals. And number one, humans believe on this planet that they are mammals. Are they mammals or are they animals?
Well, they are mammals in the degree that animals, the mammalian order is an order of your animal kingdom, and it represents in that way a higher stage of evolution. That is to say that we evaluate, and the universe can in many ways be evaluated as moving towards higher degrees of connectivity until that point of the 13th dimension, the inner layers of the spiderweb of the cosmos, where everything is dense and complete and perfect. And that's that dimension you also call God or everything or all that is. And within that point, you can conceive of everything. So below that, we would simply say that there are archangels that are manifesting, and you are, all of you, actually these angelic principles that are tending to your own expansion. But we believe, we are sorry that this perhaps does not answer your question, and that the channel may have actually erased it from his memory, what it was that you were asking him to elaborate on.
That's okay. I was asking if the human being is a mammal or an animal created in the animal kingdom in one of the different dimensions, being 7th or 11th.
Yes, now it makes sense where we were going, because essentially it is a question of perspectives and classification. So those energies we have been working with are mammalian, but notice that you are already bringing yourself to a stage where you are, for instance, using such techniques as in vitro fertilization. You also have incubation chambers. And in some of the timelines, you will explore down your future. You will become something else. Some of you will begin to experiment with cloning. Others will begin to experiment with other ways of duplicating your genetic code, such as in the astral dimensions, where it is possible, as we are doing, to sublimate your codes and then transfer them in other ways. So what we were aiming at was to explain that lower level angelic nature of the inner dimensions, or the radiant emanations from Source or God, those are actually the things that are being infused into every ascending species. And so you could think of what in the 12th dimension essentially amounts to the angels is in the 11th dimension, then that what divides itself into the envisioning of these perfect harmonic energies, these ascending species that went all through matter in order to feed their experience back to Source. And so you are mammalian at this present point, and you also do belong to the animals kingdom, but you could think of it as boxes within boxes, or those systems of classification which you have on your planet, which is to say that when you, for instance, deal with plants, you then divide them into a genus and a species, and there are different categories in order to then understand the unfolding tree of connections, or that root of the divine tree that flowers into heaven, that connects everything down here. And we hope that more fully answers your question.
Yes, of course it does, and I thank you. It's because it was spurred on from last week that I missed. And I would just ask that humanity remember the sovereignty and the equality of the animal kingdom. And I would ask that humanity look again toward the animals as the teachers they are.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much too, also for that wonderful addendum, which is completely in accordance with what we would also like to remind you of. And then we will turn the attention to that feed in there. And we will also thank you very much, Kaji, for that beautiful loving message which you left at the top. And yes, then we are moving on to this interesting question. Hello, Umblam, and thank you for all that you offer. It is exciting for me to support the new educational systems that will be sprouting in the coming years. Can you give me your perspective on what it will look like, especially for elementary school children? And there's a second question, which we believe also fits in well to this theme. I am excited to write a story for children to aid and assist them to develop as holistic beings. I will be using archetypes that embody certain energies. I would like your insights on the children's story from the Arcturian perspective. Yes, we return to those children of your species. Notice that what through many channels also have been termed indigo souls could to some extent also be termed as Arcturian starseeds. We would like to remind you that none of these categories is to divide people into better or lesser categories. It is simply to remind you that indigo or violet energy is the energy that we transmit to you. It is an energy of a very high vibrational spectrum, and it is an energy that is building within your species, because we also allowed those codes to be invested in you. And many of them were around, for instance, your capability to sing. It may seem strange, as when we come through your vocal cords, we often transmit ourselves in a type of almost clicky whisper. But in our own time, we transmitted through those vibrations our intents to each other. That is to say, native Arcturian is not interrupted. It is an ongoing vibrational scale. It doesn't have those staccato stops. And that relates to what we want to explain you about the coming changes in your school system. Because notice, as long as you have that compartmentalization that school actually refers to, that means a special segregated place within your society where you sort of pin in children for a great duration of the day. As long as you have that, you will to some degree still be suffering from a lot of those ideas of systematization of humans, that is to say, to align them to certain almost mechanical principles, such as and that conception of an hour divided into days. But those things that will begin to take place is that you will begin to realize that those free-flowing energies within human beings are actually better stimulated by allowing to flow holistically through a learning process. So what you will, for instance, will be seeing is a curriculum that is far less based on acquiring certain factual knowledge and more oriented towards the idea that you want your children to explore their own creative ability to solve problems by presenting challenges to them. So envision, for instance, that you take a group of 5 children and you allow them to build whatever they want, but they have to give you an explanation, and they also have to do a drawing of the thing they are building, and that could be in any type of material you would want, whether it's in clay or Play-Doh or Legos. Such things are good for children. They would also have to describe it in words. They would have to draw it. They would have to make a digital copy of that drawing and then play around with that. They would have to actually dive into one specific task or game of playfulness. And then they would discover in how many ways you can actually access a problem, and how enjoyable it is to keep finding new ways to uncover something that is already done. Because notice that idea of assignments you have both within how you organize much of what you call business or enterprise or within the professional realms, but it is also something that is very typical of your school systems. And when you give people assignments, they try to do an adequate job. But when you give people opportunities to express themselves, they always try to do their best, or they shy away from the task. But either of those things are more helpful than that idea that you just need to fool the system, or you just need to turn another thing in and then they will leave you alone for a little while longer. So that is something that you will see changing in your school system. And we are happy that you ask us also, how would we approach that idea of a children's tale? Notice it is a long time since we brought forward progeny in that way. And we did not, as physical beings, actually enjoy the mating act as much as we did enjoy the act of raising children to be their own. And there we would advise you, because it is best to activate these higher astral energies within your children, as you already sense, to activate those old archetypes. And therefore, we would advise you to tell the tale of a child. And we sense this should be a boy, in your case, in the story you want to tell. And he has to enter the forest in order to look for a golden egg that his older sister told him there was an elf guarding over in his den in the woods. He brings his dog with him, and they go exploring. In the first clearing, they meet a deer, and the deer speaks to the boy, and it informs him that there are other wonders in the world than golden eggs. They proceed through the woods. He then comes to a dead tree, and within its hollow, he finds a leftover. It is, what is this we're getting? It's a symbol that's quite special to your kind. He finds in that hollow, he finds, a water pitcher. So that thing you use to water flowers. He wonders, how can this have been left here? And he says that whoever has left this here may be in greater trouble, and maybe we should figure out why they did not bring their pitcher with them. Then he wanders off, forgetting about the golden egg, and he instead finds troubles in the woods. He gets scared from the animals. There's a sort of howling that frightens him. But then he stumbles upon a tiny house. And within that tiny house, there lives an old man. And the old man is the one who left the water pitcher. And he explains to him how he discovered that flowers are best grown by being left on their own. And he shows the boy that those brambles growing around his house, how he picks berries from them. He shows him how he gathers his food and speaks to the animals in the woods. He shows him how that howling he heard was the owl living in the old man's attic and keeping him company on its perch in those long winter nights. Yes, with that fairy tale-ish story, we would thank you for such a beautiful question and for allowing us to bring this through to you. We will then turn our attention to the Zoom call and ask, does anyone else want to come forward with a question?
I will.
Wonderful.
Umblam, my love, it's so wonderful to see you again.
You too, Laura. Thank you very much for joining us in this interaction, and blessings to you on this day.
When we spoke last time, you talked to me about being able to shift my energetic grid and thereby my perceived reality.
Yes.
And Archangel Metatron explained more. And then as I was looking for more information about the shapeshifter reptilian part of me that has also assisted me with this process,
Yes.
I listened to Mads's co-creation with the ancient dragons, reptilian shapeshifters, where they were talking about human DNA and the chiral dimensions.
Yes.
Am I correct that the process of shifting realities the dragons are speaking about is the same process that you shared with me?
Yes. We would say so. They have quite a different perspective, because the reptilians went, you could say they're actually far more proficient in controlling matter than we are, but they're not as proficient in necessarily controlling such things as energetic grids, because they sought their enjoyment into other dimensions. But we do sense that fierceness within you it's consolidating, and we are very happy that you are actually allowing yourself to also lend the assistance of those forces, and also that you are approaching them as those wondrous dragons that they also come forward as, because they have that, you could almost call it in the most positive, as a self-sufficient, self-assertive, self-assured way of allowing themselves to be in the material universe. And notice, for a lot of you light workers, or people who are inclined towards spiritual matters because you came in with a lot of spiritual energy, it can be very helpful for you to ally with some of these forces, because they actually can show you how to anchor yourself more in physical reality, and for instance also point you to those enjoyments in life which are not to be denied. That is to say that there are some base pleasures, just such as simple as having a snack that perhaps isn't necessarily too good for you. But when everything is balanced out, it is as important in your energetic field to connect through the earth, through those subtle enjoyments, that it is to also link back to your multidimensional self. And therefore we sense in your case that the dragons are very much helping you. You could actually think of it as yes, that they are perched on your shoulders as guardians, and know that you also, as we know, have many angelic guardians, but they are perched on your shoulders as guardians. And we believe that we have brought forward to you before the name and nature of a crocodilian guide, but it is as though this principle has grown into its full dragon nature. And now we see that luminous figure of, we would call her Trotron Trakon, which it's a very draconic name again, but she has that proud fierceness, and sort of like a sapphire glow to her. It's bluish. She's very radiant, and she is joining in with you at this point, because there is a determination growing within you to actually be here and settle into life, and therefore she would also like you to know that she's there supporting you also in that physical reintegration taking place.
Thank you very much. Is the parallel lifetime, and you talked with me about this last time as well, that's sort of the reptilian shapeshifter, is this part of that same as a guardian that's with me? Is it part of that same race as the dragons, or is it a little different?
It is a little different, but it is because they are both a part of your oversoul. So you could think of it as that expression that other reptilian guide, that crocodilian guide, was communicating to you at that point, was actually a more of a, you could think of it as an earthy or a swampy energy. It was that realignment of having gone a little out of sync with the material world, and then feeling the need to accept also, you know, having your feet in the mud and your hands in the muck, and that's the thing. But much as we explained with the 11th dimensional vision of the humans, then in many ways the 11th dimensional ascended principle of the reptilians is the dragon principle. So it's that principle shining back. So it is, you could think of it as the same spirit lineage that you are also a direct part of, but it's coming back to you from a higher perspective, because you have sort of cleared up some of those integrations into the lower energies, and now she's offering you more of that attunement of your energetic grid and your heart space.
Beautiful. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So in that, the dragons were talking about activating our quote unquote alien DNA.
Yes.
And you talked to me last time about them feeding me technical spiritual information to help assist with that process of shifting the energetic grid.
Yes.
Is that anything to do with that activating that DNA, or is that again a different?
No, it is. That is a good and discerning question, but it is a part of the same process. That is to say, as that you could think that the DNA is that idea that material reality is actually emanating from the higher dimensions. So that energetic grid is somehow, it's the structure in your personality that determines which elements of the Akashic field can flow in and actually determine what memories and thoughts you are experiencing, how your perception is, how your sensations are, but also essentially how your physical body is made up in this moment. And that is to say that, of course, as you know, you can in principle make that radical concentrated shift to a completely different reality in an instance, but it's just so very, very uncommon, because you are consciousness accepting to have that confused experience of being trapped down here, so to speak, in time space. But the fact that your energy grid is updating actually means that you can then have different DNA codes fed into your system. And that is also a part of your physical process, is that the DNA is actually altering. And that means that you will be able to hold and transmit a higher degree of energy. And it's both universal energy, but much as you could think of, you know, all the guides coming through here are essentially part of the same oversoul, which again is a part of some higher principles, and then again a part of source. So you could think of, yes, that you are emanating specific energies in harmony with your own personal experience. You are integrating specific energies from your own spirit family, and that is, for instance, your dragon guides, but it is also those other angelic energies which we sense are quite strong in your field. And there is a union of the draconic and the angelic on Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I was just that feels very true.
Yes. And there was no interruption. That was essentially our message, we would say. And we are very happy to affirm that and notice that these are also very champion-like energies to have on your side. And it is good. And we would remind you, knowing that you and others and most of those people tuning into this message are situated within that area you call the United States of America, that many of you are, because you are in many ways also undertaking a type of kind of a specific task at this moment compared to many other light workers on the planet. You are also gaining more assistance for those more champion-like energies, because there is a need to, you wouldn't say steal yourself, but to align yourself with that fierce radiance, which is also a part of your integrity as human beings.
Thank you so much. May I ask one last on this?
Yes, please do.
So am I understanding correctly that part of the function of our crystalline structure is to reflect all probable timelines within our particular dimension, and this is what is meant by chiral dimensions?
Yes, that is quite beautiful. But see, the timelines are actually quite different. So we would explain that the chiral dimensions, as they have been explained in by the reptilians, it is that idea that much as you know, you have your color spectrum, and that you can actually observe that there are different vibrations of color that your organic senses are simply not able to pick up on, or there are different vibrations or emanations of sound in the universe which you can't pick up on. And it's essentially the same idea that on top of this reality, within the same time space, there are actually energies that are in many ways akin to you, but mirrored in a way where you can't see them. And some of those more shamanic personalities would then be able to touch upon more of that. But it is because the universe is actually quite efficient in the way it experiments with time space. So it tries to fill it out. So that is, for instance, notice that the Sasquatch beings are also having experiences on this planet at the same time and you are, but it's quite rare that they choose to lower their vibration or actually shift their vibration into an aspect of, yes, a vibration that you can register with your senses. And that's actually more of the idea with chirality. That is that there's a lot of realities overlapping, but since they don't have the same codes, much as you could imagine that if you were colorblind, you know there is the existence of other colors, but you also know that you can't see them. So that is the case. But the different timelines related to the energetic grid is a very interesting question that we are happy to illuminate you on, because this relates more to that essence which you realize within, again, your 11th dimension. And we enjoy how we keep returning to this 11th and this wonderful day of 22, that it is essentially your energetic grid is kind of what accompanies on you. This fixates on you on a very particular timeline, but that again is actually seen from the higher dimensional perspective, shifted into a whole vibrational palette of different vibrations, and those determine. So you could think of it almost as pearls on a string. So those parallel realities of you, they are actually lined up with slightly different energetic grids, and where the most, you could say, the most adjacent to them are those you can just shift to immediately. But then the further away the grid gets in vibration, the more difficult it will be for you to make that switch or actually gain access to it. So that is to say that at the same time, you are actually unfolding as that total complete universe you are unto yourself. You are actually unfolding in every possible direction at the same time. And your energetic grid is the same way, but you are contained within that one pearl or diamond, which is you at this present moment.
Beautiful. It's such a joy to get to connect with you again. And thank you so much for the message of continuing to clear our darknesses so we can continue to increase our, just thank you. My love to you all.
My love and our love to you too, Laura, and we bless you very much and thank you for the love you are reflecting back to you. We remind each and every one of you of our unconditional and undying love for all that humanity is. And now we will turn our attention to those written words on that screen over there. Hello, Carol, it says. And then it says, the existence expands in all directions infinitely. Humans are an experiment of returning to light from deep darkness. As an expansion, will there be another experiment that will go even deeper in darkness to return to light? Does it continue on different planets infinitely? We thank Kitul for that question, and we hope that we are pronouncing his name correctly. We believe it's very insightful, and we also, again, even though this vessel is getting more used to it, again point to the amazement of the synchronicities, because this of course lines up with our different answer. That is to say, yes, it extends infinitely. So there are each and every one of you having different experiences. And again, in those chiral dimensions, actually, there are parts of you that are shifted into other parts of this material reality, which you wouldn't see. And some of them are, since you are asking about the darkness, some of them are virtually hellscapes. So places, apocalyptic places where things seems to have died out. But notice, for instance, and we will point this out, that it is quite true that then there are actually timelines shifting from greater darkness to greater light. And one of those, and you would perhaps consider this a hellscape, was that famous timeline, that timeline of the Greys, where they got stuck in that project of not being able to reproduce and not being able to multiply themselves, and having actually run up against a wall of technological progress. And then they faced into this timeline and began collecting DNA and managed to connect the hybrid program. And now the hybrid program is feeding back to you into those wonderful experiences that so many of you are having with, yes, either directly your hybrid children or aligning with the energies of receiving the transmissions from some of these beautiful light beings, such as the Yal or Sasani, which in manifold manifestations come through to you with messages of great hope and light. And notice also that that was actually a very dark thing that then turned up into a higher vibrational experience. And it could go down even further, but there are of course places that are so dark that we can't even access them from this conscious point or from this vibrational point. And be thankful of that, because within that there is a movement. So they sort of have to move up through the higher dimensions, those experiences, before they emanate into it. But some of the darkness you are experiencing in this world is also, so you could think of it as some of the lower energetic grids trying to ascend through this, up through this universe alongside you. And that is actually what you have lent, speaking again of the reptilian energy, that those of you who are aligning with the dragon energy are in many ways also volunteering to bring through those negative reptilian energies that have been latching on to your experience, bring them through with you in your ascension as guide and assistances, and watching them transform from that darkness as you transform from that darkness. And we know that it can seem that these reptilian energies are running amok, but it is also because it seems like the priorities of, so the reptilian agenda of harvesting fear it's pushing all its old tactics, but some of those tactics, they seem more and more hollow. And as we have pointed out, it is, for instance, hard for those spirits or those human children being born now to imagine such a thing as a world war, because they actually experience themselves as interwoven with the fate of the planet as a whole. And yes, with that loving message, we will then ask if there is a person on the Zoom call who would like to ask us a question.
Hello, my name is Alex.
With that loving message, we will then ask if.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
On the Zoom call yes. Yes. May I ask you, Alex, do you perhaps have, oh, you should close the browser. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and many blessings to you.
Yes. I hope this is better. Very much for the opportunity. I would like to ask at first about something called the Arcturus Gate, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes.
Something about ET help during birth. Could you tell me more about that?
Oh, this is a beautiful question. Thank you so much for allowing us to shed light on that particular dimension of how we assist humankind. You know, there is, as it is described, for instance, in that the Bardo Turtle or the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is actually describes that after a period of 49 days, and it's of course, that doesn't really make any sense from the spiritual perspective, but that is to say, at that point, spiritual energies actually start accumulating and attaching to the fetus. And some of these spiritual energies, they actually also just benefit from guiding the fetus along. But we will generally enter that period of pregnancy around 4.5 to 5 months, and then approaching the beginning of the third trimester, we open a type of spiritual gate where we ingrain a lot of these energies into those, well, future newborns which will enter the world. And we do this, of course, with their spiritual volition. So they volunteer to it, but it is because we offer them. The singular spirit, once it has reached a stage where it's able to connect more, let us say, willingly in the cycle of reincarnation to some of our energies, it has the ability to map and lay out a lot of the experiences and the energies that it wants to integrate into in this life. And so we offer it as much as our energy as it actually wants to have and hold. And we can do so at some astrological configurations better than others. But that is also to say that those spirits who want to align with our energies, they choose to enter at points where the astrological configurations are auspicious. And it's generally in these later months, so beginning from approximately what you would think of as, well, the middle of the dates containing the sign of Virgo, and then into and incorporating that sign of Capricorn. It is usually at that place where our energy is the strongest. And that is also the synchronicity in that we are coming forward on this equinox, because we have in so many ways learned to grow our sun within ourselves, that we offer that experience and that remembrance to you, that you are a solar system giving life to itself within itself. And many of those remembrances are very strong within those Arcturian star seeds that enter that gate. And then actually in a part of the pregnancy, you could think of, and know that we are using chronological terms, though they don't really make sense to us. But we feel the need to communicate this to you in terms that are somewhat relatable. So the child actually goes for a period of the pregnancy to be taught in the higher dimensions by Arcturian teachers. And so, for instance, the channel that you are coming through now, and we can reveal this to him as well, actually also had this type of spiritual tutelage where he connected to me as his past life. And we sense actually for approximately 2/3 of the people here present, such as you who are asking this question, you have also received this tutelage from your Arcturian guides at some point, though many of you have also received other energies. And we thank you for that beautiful question also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, and a few days ago, I remembered many things from when I was very, very young. I felt very clearly that I was being born, and that I felt a lot of love for my mother. I felt a lot of curiosity. How does that feel? How does that taste? And such intense emotions that I never remember feeling before. And towards the end, I was afraid I would forget all of these experiences that I had, and this expression came to me that said the seal has been broken. Does that mean anything?
Yes, that means a lot to us, and it's beautiful that you share this with us and the rest of us, because notice that you are so directly expressing that process which is going on, and that is to say that there had been placed the seal is in many ways that different energetic grid that had been around you, and that has been removed. And that is why you are actually feeling these sensations, which is your higher self or your actual you. That's a remembrance of how you experienced the world before you made all these compromises about having to suppress and subdue those things and those experiences because they would be detrimental to your progress. But you have been traveling up to this point, and notice that even though these things come in waves, it is increasing for you. You will begin to remember these deep sensations of love, and you will begin to unfold it. And that is, notice that is, for instance, also how we experience reality. We have that subtle savoring of everything, and know that you could think it, the seal that you mentioned, you could almost think of it as also as a type of dark looking glass. Or there is the children's tale, at least in this part of the world, the story about, well, there's a little boy called, actually believe he's called Kai, and then he gets a splinter in his heart by the Ice Queen, and then he can't see anything except as evil and wrong. And then there's this girlfriend in 2 words who sets out on a journey to save him from that sensation. And you could actually think of that experience, that it is the radiant love of your mother, that extremely pure love, which is an expression of that radiant love that the divine mother, the mother of the cosmos, that source energy that gives birth to everything, she actually holds for you, and she wants you to remember. And it's very, very beautiful that you are returning to that point. And we are there with you, with all your spirit guides and angelic family, to also savor that rediscovery of who you are.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will first turn the attention to see if there is a question here. Oh, hey, namaste. I saw the live notification question for the channelies. Can you comment on the Meldick syndrome and how collectives can become trapped in this cycle? I love how you channelers give full, no turn around the bush explanations like we can apprehend to expect.
Non, c'est genre à la 1er octobre, aujourd'hui. Bientôt.
Yes, Alex, we do not know if it is you, but maybe.
Sorry.
Hi. Oh, that is okay. Yes, we sense that it is the same name that was also on the screen.
Sorry. Wait a second.
Yes. We think, yes, please remember to mute, and thank you so much for keeping up with that, people. We think we will answer this question first, and then thank you for those nice things you are answering. Since the channeler we are coming through is not aware of what the Meldick syndrome is, it is quite difficult for us to give very detailed explanation, but we sense that what it is referring to is the idea of becoming trapped in cycles. And the way that you do that is to see that there is a type of yes, there is a date of expiry on where everything actually turns sour. And so what you need to do, because you are waveforms or functions, so you are waves in the rollings of the cosmic sea, that is to say that at some point you change into something else and you merge into something else. And so it is important for you to identify those cycles and to see where, once you have actually it has run its course, it will begin to have this signature of stagnation or stalemate. And from that point, you can then actually allow inspiration into your life in order to change that cycle. But what often happens is that you need that intervention or that type of, if not rock bottom, then at least scraping your knee. That is to say that humans often need to grow tired of things. And we know it's quite painful to do that, but that is actually almost how you learn. And there is we believe in in the poet William Blake, there is in his The Marriage of Heaven and Hell that famous phrase that the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom, which is to say that many cycles, you actually only learn how to free yourself from them once you have repeated them to the point where they no longer satisfy you and actually really frustrate and impede your progress. So we hope that shed some light on it. And then, yes, we would ask, is there someone on the Zoom call who would like to ask a question? Do not fear, we bring you love.
I have another question.
Yes.
And oh, by the way, yeah, I know, like, when I forgot to mute before, it was weird. But
That's all right. There's many things happen, and know that we foresee that this thing, it actually runs quite smoothly, and the way it is, even though that from a human perspective, and especially from the channeler's perspective, he gets a little frazzled, but we see that this also fits into the process. So yes, you are more than welcome to offer another question, friend.
okay, this is quite an unusual one.
Yes.
So basically, I saw a specific psychological pattern in some people that intrigued me, and I've been making up theories about it, and I wonder if it's real, how real it is, and what's the truth about it. I even have a name for it.
Yes, could you describe the pattern for us?
I call it Byronism, and it's some kind of specific crystallization that happens in some people who have like very high light in their DNA, but there's some kind of incompatibility friction effect with the person's soul DNA and their inherited Earth DNA, because of the whole ancestral oppression trauma that's in it, and it creates a specific kind of personality trait. And it can resemble narcissism, but I don't think it's actual narcissism, like the true form. It's very difficult to explain, and I don't know if it's like how real it is and what it really is, because I don't want to like spread propaganda.
No, but we do sense that actually both your reflection and your idea of approaching this question springs from a compassionate place where you want to more fully understand your fellow human beings, and thereby also more fully understanding your own process on this planet. And we would simply say that essentially every pattern you can observe is to some extent real. That is to say that there is an interplay between observed reality and your reflection of it that creates this pattern and shapes it into creation. But then, of course, some patterns, they become what you also call memes, we believe. So that idea of genetic or cultural reproductions. So there is an idea, and then this idea spreads, and then all of the sudden, you are viewing the world in terms that you didn't do before. And that has happened quite a few times, especially, for instance, with those religious or great political ideological revolutions that your species has passed through. And we sense that but we also sense that energetically, the pattern that you are pointing to is quite real it's quite meaningful from a spiritual perspective, because it encapsulates the idea that some people seem to actually pursue they seem to hold quite a lot of light, but they seem to pursue it in a way that obscures it, or that actually darkens it, or that's where they chase personal gratification and other things. But the way we perceive it is in many ways that these people they're having the experience of running away. And you could, of course, in some way explain everything as a game of hide and seek. So there's a part of you that's trying to find you, and there's another part that's trying to get away. And in this case that you point to, it's the spirit that's trying to find them, but is pushing them in a direction where their free will is choosing to try and express itself and latch on to things that will give it some sort of still relationship to other people where it can feel secure in itself. And it's because it's essentially difficult for the pattern you are pointing to open up to that spiritual energy. But much as we have also been pointing to the reptilian energy, what is happening with this vibrational upgrade of your entire collective is that those people, you will begin to see them breaking down. And you also point to the pattern of narcissism, which is quite interesting, because that's also an energetic pattern that has in many ways been effective in the old energies. That is to say, you can in a sense describe a personality trapped in that modality of narcissism as someone who can only exist in either a space that's called I'm okay and you're not okay, or a space that's called you're okay and I'm not okay. And so they're constantly striving to keep themselves out of that place where they feel people are above them, and they do so by trying to be above other people. But you will see surprising influxes in this as this emotional pattern becomes more and more extreme. And notice that also what has been happening is with your social media is that you have become numb to a lot of the narcissistic expressions. That is to say, a media such as Instagram, where people who are very much capable of presenting themselves in a highly stylized, or you could almost say fake way in that medium, has become almost a parody of themselves, because it's a feat that doesn't resonate with how you actually begin to sense people through your heart space.
It's quite accurate.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Yes.
There's a lot of points I had the impression of seeing, but like with the whole Byronism pattern, it's like some kind of strange area in between narcissism and something else. Like, I don't know, but there's like something else, and there's this concoction of energy, and I wonder how common and prevalent it is, and if it's rare to human perspective at all. Like, is there any way we can try to help the people who experience this light escape, this light incompatibility thing? And if there is like if there's a strong factor in indoctrination and politically unstable environments in childhood.
Yes. This is a quite complex question, but we would say, and we sense that, please correct us if it is wrong, that you also derive the name of Byronism from that that very British and romantic
Yes.
poet, Lord Byron.
I saw similarities.
Yes, and we believe that he's also a good image. It's because this is quite descriptive of. We believe it's in the Childe Harold that there is perhaps the most famous line of Byron, that he's standing on the bridge of sighs, a palace and a prison on each hand. And that's in many ways that Byronic worldview that you are pointing to, that they sense that they can only try to either live in the palace and be that fake overexpressive self, or they can feel trapped in a prison. And so it's a pattern that has been increasing along the lines of human affluence, because it's you see the more you get base physical comforts and allow yourself to live out some of those more base pleasures, such as Byron also did, it's also a place where you then actually see the responsibility of other people and as something that is imprisoning, and you feel that you should stay in a sort of floating sense of freedom is not, but independence is a sense of fake independence, because you are always intertwined with something. And that is the pattern that goes on in that Byronism. And we would say this is perhaps a character trait that energetically to some extent is present within maybe 1.7% of your population, so but to different degrees. But it is through recognizing the prison of that idea that you actually move onwards. And it is a way where that distraction can't be possible either. But then we would also, yes, connect that to your other question, which is whether that indoctrination is taking place. And it most certainly is. But notice that it's usually not done out of a malevolent perspective, but out of the malevolent perspective of fear. And so it's subconscious that you have all those systems of control and codes of control and ways of trying to teach children how to remain on a seat for a long time and to listen and to only ask relevant questions and to keep their mouth shut when something else comes up. So that is a type of indoctrination, and it connects because that actually, you could say, almost fertilizes or encourages that Byronism, that by trapping people in a prison where they aren't really responsible for their own sense of self, then the alternative becomes that type of facade existence, or that escape into something that seems more independent. And what you are all realizing is that the true value of existence as those social beings you are comes from that voluntary connection that you choose to enter into with other beings that align with you.
Okay, thank you. Because the cases I saw were quite severe, in my opinion. So I wanted to get like more detail on what's really happening with the people that I haven't seen, which have this kind of energetic trait.
Yes.
And some people could, like, when extreme enough, some people could actually view it as a person, an actual personality disorder, but I don't, because I don't like to medicalize everything. It's more like an energetic signature that gets really strong, and it can be, to human perspective, like a pathology, but it's way more complicated, and it's not just in the context of trying to medicalize character traits, which I have trouble with that kind of control before. And I wonder if it has like a connection to autism, because I saw some prevalence with it, and especially like the borderline pattern.
Or we believe that perhaps it's a... Oh, sorry, there was a cat meowing in this room, but we did pick up on your question. It is another dreaming cat that is also experiencing how wonderful it can be to live, as we point to. Because notice that your animals, they don't have these type of traits, but that is also to say that we agree very much that your idea of pathologizing people with labels of mental illness is actually very much an impediment to understanding that they are also complete beings, or they are, well, imperfect beings moving towards completion in their own special way, and that may look very dissonant at that point where they are at. And that's not, of course, we know that you're all able to sense when a person is really so frazzled or so disconnected from themselves that they actually need intervention or help or severe medical care. But it's much better to actually perceive it as patterns and energetic patterns playing out through that personality, because it is in many ways it's an ingrained pattern, but it's also something that is in many ways necessary for a creature becoming self-conscious. For instance, it is that it actually proceeds through that narcissism. So that sense that I myself am the sole center of the world, because it's a way to also actually come into the idea that the consciousness is centered on you, and you are the most important point in your conscious experience, which is true for all of you. But then there is the misidentification if you remain stuck in those patterns and keep failing from growing, such as you also describe in your psychology, where they actually cut you off from those experiences you are supposed to have. But notice again, and that, for instance, it is a quite new and in many ways mechanical way where you prefer to label human beings and everything in a very encyclopedic and minute way that is taking place with, for instance, psychopathologies. And that's something that it has been going on for a long time, but has been intensifying through these last centuries. And these categories are breaking down because you're learning to see people much more as energetic signatures. And that also makes it far easier, because then you don't necessarily need to think with your mind, then go through the list and say, oh, well, but this person behaves this way and that way and this way and that way. And that, for instance, with the borderline pathology, we would also connect to it, because that's, for instance, a pathology where it will be, when interacting with the person for a longer interval of time, will become quite clear to your heart and to your gut sensation that there is something misaligned here, that the energetic exchange is not good for you. And that is actually, to us, a much easier way of discerning, because then you don't have to do all those calculations and wonder if maybe you are mistaken, because your heart is never mistaken.
Okay, that is quite a. I appreciate the answer, and I really want to like keep working with my guides and my astral friends, so we can like research and develop these theories all together. And I've been doing that for a long period.
Yes, but we would also remind you, and we thank you very much for that, but that we are, and more specifically, there are Arcturian energies, but there's quite a lot of influx of inspirational energy from, yes, how beautiful. It's just, we don't necessarily know this star by name, but it is the upper left star in the image of Orion on the night sky. There's a lot of energy coming in from that star, inspiring you. And there we would just remind you that these ideas you are having, they are essentially also epiphanies and downloads. And then with your cultivation of skill and thought and understanding, you are becoming increasingly better at expressing them in the world. But we sense that the work you are doing is important, and that you are being led there by your higher self. So you are very much on the right path with this, and we thank you and bless you very much for the work you are doing.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question, because this is like getting a lot. But first of all, I'd say I agree, because I have strong Arcturian and Saturnian energies. But the question is there like, are there like suggestions on like, I have this project where I'm going to build like residential types of homes around Canada and Eastern Europe, maybe more, but I don't know. I don't like know that yet. And basically, what I plan to do with the GFL is that I'm going to get in contact with some new non-compliant communities that are that work with the GFL, and I'm going to like establish certain requirements and like on a really compromised star seeds, and like we're going to put medical beds, and I'm going to heal them, and then I'm going to invite my fellow light workers. And I just want to hear like what like synopsis and how you feel about the situation and what can be done to make it even better.
Yes. Well, we sense that we will deliver a brief answer on this, because we will simply remind you that this is a place where you are also being guided, and do not fear that you need to do anything better, because it's growing for you and the intention is there and it is manifesting and solidifying. So we would also thank you for what you're doing in that sense, because it is progressing and you will receive the right inspiration when you need to. So we will thank you very much for those questions and for those insights that you brought forward and that we were allowed to also illuminate. And then we will ask, is there another voice on this communal call that will come forward with a question?
Hi, my name is Carol.
Yes, hello, Carol.
I've never asked this before, but I'm wondering, can you tell me what influence, do I have any Arcturian influence or Pleiadian influence, or can you tell me where I'm from, or?
Yes. Well, we will sense that, we sense that you are from the northeastern part of the American continent, most specifically in this incarnation. But that is, of course, to say that that you have connections into, extending all the way back to source. And depending on where you actually are in your progress, you can actually sense that it is different energies facing in and out of your experience. But yes, our Arcturian energy is, you could say it is active, particularly in, this is quite interesting. It's actually, it's quite active in the way that you carry yourself on your feet. And it has something to do with a slight hovering sensation that you don't necessarily notice, but that is also trying to literally lift you up and carry you through this world. And that has very much to do with your Arcturian guide. And we can, his name is Molto, Molto, and he is attempting to teach you the lesson of abundance. So he was kind of a, well, you could think of him as a service provider, but it's yes, you know, extraterrestrial occupations can be a little difficult to explain, but he was in his own incarnation a type of combination between a service provider and a circus host. That is to say, he put on these very, very abundant displays. So imagine living Fabergé eggs actually creating themselves and morphing into different units of themselves, but in a kind of fun, surprising, playful way, like in a circus. That was very much what he was doing, and that's that richness, that abundance he's pointing to in your existence. And then Pleiadians. Oh yes, we sense you are more guided from those higher dimensional. So there's not a very particular Pleiadian guide necessarily coming forward at this point, but the Pleiadian collective is attempting to shower you in their type of bluish. It's a very bright bluish starlight, and they're attempting to shower you with this to also make sure that you actually remind yourself of the halo that you are able to carry when you turn your attention to it.
Wow. Yeah, I do feel they're trying to hover me. I sometimes I feel I'm ready to go to the fifth dimension with a lot of understanding of stuff that I've received lately. So Muto, yeah. And it's funny because I'm very poor, but I'm very abundant. I'm poor financially, but I have abundance of everything. And I'm going, where does it all come from? I managed to get all this abundance. Some of my friends would go, Carol, you're so poor, but you have so many things. I go, that's because I invest on the things that I really needed.
Yes.
To accomplish all the cooking stuff that I needed, the clothes that I needed. I'm just amazed. I also have another question. I had a master called Babaji who has helped me in my meditation.
Yes.
Feel him less and less. Is it possible that he's gone to another dimension, or is he still my guide, or his name is Babaji?
Yes, we see him. He's kind. He's a very kind energy. He has this almost like roly-poly. You know, many masters, they have huge bellies, as we have been discussing. Or sorry, we have been discussing, because it is that that ability to actually take that disgust with the world and then hold it and then turn it into laughter and joy. And the reason he's still with you, but the reason he's receding is that he has been working on, yes, more centering you into some of those more earthbound energies. And that's actually, that you have in many ways completed that. And that's also why you are now more connecting to some of your star family. And we think it is so beautiful for you to it's so beautiful for us and for everyone to hear how that abundance is reflected in your life in a lot of different circumstances, but not in the financial. Because notice that we know that financial troubles is except for a very small minority on the planet, it is something that you have to deal with, even though you are perhaps living in a very affluent place. Then there is still actually the continual worry of you not being able to uphold your life. And that is that fear energy of the old system. And notice what you have spiritually done, which is quite prudent, is that through poverty, you have actually taught yourself the abundance of your immediate environment. Because, for instance, notice that, and we believe that it has been brought forward through this channel through other times, but it is such a good example of that many of you intuitively sense that one of the worst karmic fates a person can have is being born the child of a very, very successful person that is like a billionaire or a high status celebrity or something. Because the challenges that should be present and the impediments that should be present in order for you to learn to grow in other areas, those will actually help you grow, but they are not present if you are constantly, well, being fed with a silver spoon in your mouth. And so that is why we would very much commend you for looking at that. And we would also say that we sense that your financial situation is something that you have manifested in order to bring you to this place. And we know it seems kind of dire to you, but we would also remind you that there is that slingshot effect, which you may have heard from channels such as Bashar, that you have actually manifested this also to teach you to uncover that mystery, where there is a place where your abundance will all of a sudden also begin to take financial situations. So we sense in the coming decade, you will have shifted into a place where this doesn't worry you at the end of the decade. Approximately at the beginning of 2029, you will have shifted into this. But know, of course, that it's not like then you will turn a leaf and then suddenly your bank account will just look different. It is because you're actually being led to express those talents and gifts you have as something that also allows you to attract financial surplus into your life.
Yeah, I come from a millionaire family, but they never taught the children how to deal with our finances. And I feel like because I come from a millionaire family, and even though I didn't have much money, I still managed to get the abundance of the things that I needed. Yeah.
Yes, but notice how, again, this contrast principle, how beautiful it is in many ways that you brought yourself to a place where you actually didn't feel that resistance. And also it can be difficult to actually bring yourself to true compassion or understanding with other people before you have had that experience of lack. And so there was also, well, spiritually, you turning towards your heart space and those experiences that really matter, meant that you actually turned away from that financial abundance that was in many ways ingrained into your upbringing.
Yeah. I decided more spiritual than material, even though I got all the material. But I was really working on my spiritual experience, betterness and understanding and wanting not to escape from the earth, but to be able to bring both a spiritual energy and material energy into a balance on this earth, so that we can, be more, enjoy more, or stay here. Yeah.
Yes. And we thank you very much for both that intention and that work you are doing, because it is working. And notice then that what your guide motto is also trying to activate within you and teach you and remind you is that once you actually have that separated yourself from that energy that was impeding you, then you can rediscover it from a new perspective. So that sense of bounty, you could almost, or at least plenty, you could almost call it, is something that that you will also discover. And we would actually remind the entire collective of those tuning into this message at some point, that never has there been a light worker who wasn't geared to actually give rather than receive. It's a very, very common energetic, and it's not necessarily a misalignment, but it is a sort of imbalance that you have begun comfortable with exuding your light to some degree, because you have that natural ability to actually give and then be reflected as someone who is a wonderful person. But you also coming from those dimensions where personal gratification doesn't have any sort of relevance. It's difficult for you to enter into those ideas of reception or receiving or taking, you could essentially call it, because to you that's something that shouldn't be necessary. And we would simply say that there is a cycle in anything. So we remind you that there can also be a gift. If someone has something to offer, there is a gift in receiving it. And notice, for instance, the abundance that is taking place in this existence, where the vessel that we are coming through feels that he would actually like to offer this sort of weird skill he has discovered. And at the same time, he is enjoying that other people are then willing to actually do him the good turn of receiving that energy and reflect it back to him, because that is growing all of us. And so notice that in the higher dimensions, we perceive those cycles as so natural that we don't necessarily put them up in a type of battle or dichotomy between each other. So that yes.
Another thing that I've noticed also was, when I would receive things when I didn't expect them, I gave gratitude. I always thanked them, and I think by thanking them and showing gratitude for the surprising things that they would give me, I think they were really appreciative of that I was recognizing the gifts that they were giving me, and that I was reconnaissant. I was recognizing. I was being thankful. I was being thankful to them for everything that they would give me. Like some people, they get a lot of things, but they're not thankful. They just think that it's just giving to them like that. And I think that the gratitude and being thankful for the things that they give you is also very important as a beautiful energy to be shared from as above, so below. Right?
Yes, we would like to reaffirm that, because that is so beautiful. And notice that gratitude is in many ways that highest expression of the receiving mode, which is actually allowing yourself to really feel, savor, is the word that we have been using here, those gifts that are hiding in the incarnated experience. That well, essentially in many ways everything is an unwrapping. So it is those gifts you receive on Christmas Eve, and then again we could use the image that often, well, if you have tried celebrating Christmas with small children, that it's very, very ineffective to overwhelm a 2 or a 3-year-old with a hoard of gifts, because it actually takes away from that immediate experience of appreciation they have with the one gift. So there can be, for instance, some strategic lessons in then giving them gifts with times apart. So that's simply an example, because we point to then that you also show in your experience that it is actually, when you have gotten used to also not expecting anything, then what you receive you are truly very grateful for. And gratitude is in many ways the sublime sensation that the angels, it's the praise that the angels sing to the Lord or the infinite or the source or the divine mother or whatever you want to call it. That is essentially that hymn of praise ye for all the love and the light that you shower upon us, and that we are receiving, and that you are also receiving. So we thank you very, very much for that beautiful sentiment and blessed questions. And we bless you very much, Carol. And then we will turn this vessel's attention to this. It says, beautiful. Hi, Arcturians. Can you explain your influence in ancient knowledge, such as that of Druid physicians and their healing techniques, such as mistletoe plant as a cancer treatment? Oh, yes, this is also a very, very beautiful question. Because we have been instrumental in learning you the secret arts of incantations. And that is in many ways that what was understood in Druid magic and what was understood, for instance, in the magic that was called Seder and Galdar in this area of the world in the Norse period, which means plant magic or the preparation of magic potions on one side, and on the other, that Galdar, or that Yella, you could actually, is it related to etymologically, which means that it's the incantation of spells. And notice that we, as that singing race, and I as a composer of tangible melodies, as I have explained to you, we actually gave very much of this technology as a type of light code through that Arcturian portal we also mentioned. We offer this ability to sacralize or make sacred those potions, plants, and energies that can be brought forward by nature by investing intention into them. And that intention, as some of your shamanic traditions still known, is actually best held and cultivated and developed and grown and experienced through the element of changing vibration. That is to say, the element of song, that beautiful incantation. And so we would advise you, when working with these remedies, that you also take your time to actually invest intention into them and singing over them and allowing them to do their magic. Then we would remind you it is interesting with the mistletoe, because it also, notice that the logic of treating mistletoe with cancer is in many ways apparent, because the mistletoe is in and of itself a type of cancerous growth. It's beautiful to watch how it's beautiful, not the cancerous growth, of course, but the mistletoe, it's quite beautiful to watch how it actually latches onto something, and then from a slow beginning, it begins to spread into that type of grand, is almost a ball-like construction. And there you could say it sort of steals the life force from that life form, the tree it attaches to, but it also adds something else to it, energetic feel. And that is to say that in many ways, the mistletoe is this type of magic plant that belongs to many worlds, and it's able to shift those plants that it gathers also into some of those more chiral dimensions and make their energies available to some of those more fey or fairy-like creatures that otherwise wouldn't be able to access the tree energies. And so that can seem quite negative to you, but notice then what it does when you use it in the treatment of cancer. Because in the treatment of cancer, there you actually also invite the dark energies through the mistletoe into the body, but you do it to match the vibration of the cancer, that thing which is kind of neither fish nor fowl. It's something that's a living organism, but is only growing in order to actually kill the organism it's a part of, but whereby it will also destroy itself. So you could say in many ways, cancer actually defies logic, because it's shooting itself in the foot. and that is why you, in many ways, it can be helpful to, as you also discovered very roughly with your chemotherapy, cancer has that vibration that actually it makes sense to match it with something else. And mistletoe being able to actually being a type of bridge from those more dark or chiral fairy realms, the realms of the dark elves, for instance, then to into those more bright or happy energies, such as the medicine of the gods. And it is through the opening of that perspective, also by the breaking down of some physical resistance, by those toxins we say, and you know that often toxins are medicine when used in a context where the patient is sick. But those toxins, they actually open up to that perspective. So we believe that answered the question, and we will check. Yes, it did. Then we will ask, is there someone on the Zoom call who feel that they have a question that they are still feeling?
But it's Carol again, but I'm asking for Luke because Luke's connection is slow.
Yes.
Let me read. He's asking, how many races partake in sittings of the Federation? And is the Federation mind controlled by Alpha Draconian race? He also has a couple questions here. Is there any dispute between the Targatians and the Federation? And what is the role of the Targatians in relations to Earth? His other question is Swaru the granddaughter of Ishtar? And when
Yes, we would remind him that the time is running a little late and the channel is getting quite tired. So we believe we will address the Galactic Federation questions and then save the others for another time. But it is the case that the Galactic Federation is what you know coming through this channel as the Galactic Council of Light. Understand that Federation has a very negative association to people brought up in the political culture that he was brought up in a very ancient monarchy, for instance. But you could think of it so the Federation is actually quite, it's completely equal, and the exchange of energies that take place as they reside in the 10th dimension are very, very understood to be furthering the natural progress of the universe. So therefore, we believe that the Alpha Draconians have no fear. They're not able to, well, a term such as mind control actually becomes completely meaningless once you enter into those higher dimensional levels, such as the Galactic Council, because at that place there is actually no mind, because mind is the type of, you could think of it as the type of process that translates from the non-physical to the physical and the physical to the non-physical. So there's an interchange, and the Alpha Draconians are not in that way lording it over parts of, they're only lording it over those parts of the galaxy which they have in many ways negotiated with the Galactic Federation or the Galactic Council to actually be in the higher dimensional perspective, serving the further progress. But that's not to say that we and other entities don't, from our perspective of benevolence, in many ways disprove. We just simply understand the multidimensional perspective of this. So that's the case. And notice that there is actually no sense of hostility in that presence. So the Alpha Draconians are in many ways serving as a balance in this universe, because this universe was also very bright at the beginning. It is a very, very bright universe, as your natural sciences are also pointing to. And therefore, it's in many ways also kind of helpful to have this type of, well, you could almost think of it as the function that your slugs also serve in in the garden as they actually somehow also accelerate the consumption of energies and the transmutation of energies by bringing in that pain and that darkness and that experience of yes, you could think egoism or egotism. You could also term it as. So we hope that will be sufficient answer, and we will leave the rest of the answers as a type of teaser, as we sense the energy is getting a little late. But we will answer if is there someone who has a question, has not posed a question yet, and who would like to pose us a question?
Yes, this is Lauren from Alex's computer.
Yes.
I do have just one quick question, and really appreciate your time and the channel's time.
Yes.
I came across this information recently about Rh negative and positive blood types, and this idea that people with Rh negative blood types are starseeds, and people with a positive Rh factor are more earth energies. And I'm just curious if there's anything to that. Yeah, if there's anything to that idea.
Yes, that's quite beautiful. Know that we are going purely on energy here, as the factual knowledge of the channel isn't necessarily intimate with the idea of Rh blood types, but we do sense that in this phenomenon you are describing, yes, it is again the idea that your DNA is determined by your energetic grid, and that means that the blood that actually flows, there are physical markers as to what kind of energies they carry, and that is, for instance, also the case with bringing it around that the blood type that of AB negative, for instance, is a blood type that has kind of a lot of reptilian energy in it, or carries more of it. So it means it has more of that repellent effect. So we can verify and say, yes, this is something that carries more starseed energy, and it also allows for more angelic energy. So it's the indication of a slightly higher vibration at the potential for a very great increase in vibration from the physical point of view.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And just to wrap up, is there anything that I have a negative Rh blood type. Is there anything I could do to come into that acceleration or work with that energetic potential?
Yes. That's a beautiful question. We sense there are several things. So there are partially the ingestion of certain of those plants you have almost come to know as superfoods, though they were quite regular foods to your ancestors, but you have in many ways forgotten them. And we sense in your case, a plant such as kale, you would actually enjoy, and it would shift your energetic signature. But that's a quite literal advice. There's a more we could say metaphysical or abstract advice, and that is to say that if you begin by getting to know your palms, so the palm of your hands, and we don't mean that discipline of chiromancy or divining the future by the lines of your hands. We mean those soft nerve points, because notice that here the connection, your sensation is very, very subtle, and it's very finely attuned to what goes on. So by tracing the bloodlines in your hand, you are actually connecting to and activating those patterns within the bloodline. And then you can tune in. So if you quiet your mind while you do this, you can actually try to attempt to what messages is flowing within that blood. And that will give you and guide your intuition further as to those things you would like to explore.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you too. And many blessings. We also appreciate that beautiful question. Now we will yes, open the eyes of the channel and ask, is there a final questioner who hasn't posed a question, who still needs some sort of advice or just a blessing or a word of hello from us? There is not, we sense. That is great. We also sense that the energy in the channel is a little tiring for him at this point. And it has been very, very wonderful to interact with and illuminate all of you. You know, we would not leave you without a prayer and a blessing. And so we will translate this vibration and offer you this prayer. You have come to this point to illuminate yourself. And this illumination, it does not take place from without you. It takes place from within you. And this illumination, it is much as that flower sitting in your heart space. It is growing, it is expanding, it is incorporating all those disparate parts of yourself into a new mosaic, a new mirror, a new type of fractal, which you can reflect yourself through, and which is that essence connecting you to that higher essence. Those two essences, they melt together and they become you, the most essential part of reality is where you find yourself. And from that point, illumination begins, light begins, love begins. You have begun to love. We love each and every one of you. I, Umblam of the Arcturian Council, I thank you so much for this beautiful co-creation. I bless you and I remind you that we are able to assist you should you call upon us. Blessings and love to you this day of your equinox, sweet human beings. Hi guys.
Hi, Matt. Nice to smile. Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you too. What a lovely session out there, and of course I remind you I do personal sessions if some of you feels like you would love to do some personal work, and it's donation based. And I also next Monday there will be another live channeling, same time, but Monday 28th of September, and it will be Archangel Michael the next time because it's St. Michael's Eve.
See you there for Archangel Michael. Yes,
excellent. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and your equinox over there, and safe passage.
Keep your heart smiling. Bye.
Thanks,